need to move closer to me. Hi, everyone. I'm here with my dear friend, Dr. Elliott H Hamioff. I explained some of his credentials, but I'm going to start off with him telling a little bit more about himself right now.
Well, basically, thank you very much for having me, Shiva. It's an unparalleled privilege and an honor to be here today. But I just wanted to say that I first got started interested in climate change back in the mid-1970s and into the 80s when I became a research professor at UCLA after getting my PhD from Cambridge University and doing research into Ice Age animals and life in Southern California. And I was working with the George Page Museum before it was even built on Wilshire Boulevard, dealing with La Brea tar pits animals that, believe it or not, in Southern California, there were woolly mammoths and mastodons and saber-toothed tigers during the Ice Age that all died off shortly at the end of the Ice Age. Now that got me started into doing TV shows after I produced several dozens of TV programs for PBS and the international TV markets. I produced several shows and interviewed many of the top climatologists doing shows called Ice Age Civilizations, Atlantis, The Secret Star Mappers of the Lost World, and one of my favorites is Dark Secrets of the Black Sea, all dealing with ancient civilizations, all dealing with climate change and sea level rising and dropping, and a look at the Earth's history.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm going to be watching those videos, maybe watch them today. I got a day off. So. So what got you into the whole subject of climate change to begin with? Like what piqued your interest?
Well, like I said, I got started and interested in the differences and the evolution of the Earth's climate here in Southern California with such a shift of animal and plant species and how it was so much more lush here in Southern California. And then when I did these shows on ancient civilization, it got me started that I started seeing people who were cherry picking the results of some researchers and overlooking the results of other researchers. And science is an ongoing thing. So there's people that make one set of findings who are oceanographers. There's other people who are studying the same topic, but who are naturalists. There are other people who are looking at the same topic who are climatologists. So it's all the different points of view, the different perspectives that somebody could be studying the same project, the same topic, and come up with certainly some with different answers. And that's what I was finding is the more I was doing these shows, the more I was doing the research and interviewing the different scientists, I was finding that there is no consensus, that there is absolutely nothing that anybody is saying is a given, because that's not science. It's not a law. Science is not a law. Science is an ongoing evolution of research, of observation, and then coming to conclusions based on the evidence. And I was seeing there was a lot of people out there that cherry pick the research that they want to see, that they want to hear, and they are absolutely disregarding all of the other stuff. So that's was getting more and more motivated to follow this line of thought, which is why I did a 3-part miniseries on ancient civilizations and climate change and global warming. And I was one of the very first people, believe it or not, that did a show on nuclear winter and climate change back 25 years ago.
Wow. Talking
about tropical forest destruction and the possibility of nuclear winter. So I was definitely in on the ground floor on this whole climate change.
That actually reminds me of the co-founder, John Coleman, when he was discussing something that was really funny. He was like, you know, the way that they're doing the whole climate change scenario is kind of like this. Like there was a lot of shark bites, and at that same time, a lot of people were eating ice cream. Well, you can't correlate the two, but that's what climate scientists sometimes do, is they correlate something that has no relevance. It's all about, it was hot during that time, so of course there's going to be more, shark bites because more people are going to be in the water and more people are going to eat ice cream, but you can't put those two together because they have no relevance to being together. And I remember Bill Nye saying that if you don't believe in climate change, you should be in jail, which is against science. That is so anti-science, right?
Well, absolutely. And you see, another thing that I have to point to your viewers is that there is nothing wrong with climate change. Change is a given in the evolution of the Earth. Now, there's a cute point going back to your story of the shark bite. Is that some of the people don't know that 10,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, that the Earth goes through ice age periods and then global warming periods. And 10,000 years ago, the planet went through a global warming, and the sea levels rose at least 200 or 300 feet. The polar ice caps were melted. Europe was under constant snow, and now it became more temperate. And there were no airplanes or coal-fired plants. And so what was the cause of that global warming period? It's the Earth's natural changes of the Earth population of animals and plants and the interaction of the climate with the oceans. And these are all things that has nothing to do with people.
And here we've got, remember Atlantis, you can tell them the reason why it's underwater is not because they were dropping down, the city wasn't dropping down, it was the water was rising up. So that's happened over and over, right?
Well, right, and it turns out that Atlantis is not just one city. It was entire civilizations that were based at the coastline, just like America. Okay, where's the major populations? In San Francisco, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Diego are all on the coast. New York City, Washington, D.C. is all on the coastline. So if the ocean level, the sea level, rose 200 or 300 feet, then all of those cities would be inundated. That's exactly what happened at the last ice age when the sea levels rose 200 or 300 feet. Thousands of species went extinct. And there were no airplanes or cars or anything like that. So what was the cause of that last ice age? Was the natural order of the planet.
Yeah, it wasn't the CO2s or the methane, right?
Well, CO2, methane, oxygen is all intertwined with the evolution of the Earth. Okay.
Exactly. I have another question for you after that, but go finish your thoughts.
Well, it's just as a show to your viewers on the egocentric view that the Earth is rising or increasing in temperature or decreasing in temperature, or is it good or is it bad, or it's like it's our point of view, so we're saying no, that's bad. But it's a very cute, funny thing about carbon dioxide and methane, which is essentially the gas that you use in your stoves. Okay. Now, few people, I bet in your viewing audience, few people would know that at one point in the Earth's history, for 2 billion years, billion with a B, years of the Earth history, it was happy with carbon dioxide and a methane gas atmosphere. And it was filled with all kinds of life and single-celled organisms that was completely filled the planet, okay? And it was a happy society. It was happy life. It was happy, right. But it was happy for 2 billion years. Then what happened was this upstart single-celled organism that polluted the entire atmosphere by producing oxygen. It produced oxygen as a waste product, as a byproduct, as it's like we produce feces, it was producing oxygen. And that wiped out oxygen, by the way, is a highly corrosive, deadly poisonous gas in the scope of life, and in the scope of the universal form of life on all kinds of planets. It's a highly corrosive gas. And so what happened was it wiped out 99% of the entire population of the entire planet through its pollution. Okay, so would you consider this organism that's producing oxygen to be a deadly, poisonous polluter and killed off 99% of the planet, or would you consider that to be a good thing? Okay?
Which is so funny. I went to see Jordan Peterson. This just reminds me. And some question on the Q&A was, is jealousy a good thing or a bad thing? And he's like, you know, well, it's really, everyone's making it out as a bad thing. But, I mean, if you have a partner that's being, you know, like picked up or something, I'm paraphrasing, so I'm not using the same exact words. If you don't feel like there's some kind of, you know, something there, that there's no jealousy, then it's like you're saying that that person isn't really something special to you. So, you know, jealousy is known to be a bad thing, but I mean, doesn't everybody get jealous if somebody's like, you know, giving someone else a little bit too much attention that you like? I mean, I would think that would be a good thing, that you like someone enough to feel those feelings, period. So it's
right.
Just like anything, you know, you can see a good side and a bad side to it. And, or some people actually just don't. They either just see a good side or a bad side. And I find those people very close-minded. I think that there's always a good and bad of everything. There might be a silver lining to something. Like, for instance, my car broke down and I was supposed to go on a trip on Monday, so I had to take it to the shop. It didn't actually break down, but it was making a really weird noise. And I got it fixed. And yeah, I didn't get to go on my vacation, but next week I'm working so much I wouldn't have had a chance to fix it. So I could have thought of that as a bad thing, but I decided to look at it differently. Okay, I'm totally getting off the subject. Okay, but let's get back to this science discussion. And what do you think about the whole political hysteria about climate change? And were you okay with Trump pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord?
Okay, well, let me just say one thing that you know, I just wanted to settle, okay. Is that there is nothing wrong with climate change. There is nothing wrong with global warming or global cooling. That's not an issue. That is happening on a daily basis throughout Earth's history. Climate change is always going to be occurring in the Earth's existence, okay, in Earth's history. It's a matter of what our contribution to that is, and is that a bad thing, or is that a good thing? Okay.
Do you think that there's a lot of effect going on? Like, do you think that our CO2s and our methane gas are really affecting the planet in a negative way that's making it so that we can't live?
Well, right. And what I have in my personal view, my personal opinion, is that question has not been settled. And I am getting very frustrated and angry that there's people that get in the media, that people that get in the internet, and that say that this is conclusive or this is absolute. There are no absolutes in science, and there's nothing that's conclusive about this topic. That there are so many different studies, so many different conflicting stories, so many different conflicting conclusions, that there is no agreement. And I don't care who is out there saying that it's a done deal and it's already finished. They are people that don't know anything about anything, that they don't know anything about the research that's been done. They haven't interviewed any of the absolute first-line, front-line researchers as I have interviewed throughout the country, throughout the world.
Yes.
And so I know from my own personal experience that this topic, this aspect has absolutely not been confirmed in any way. Now, you mentioned something about that Paris Accord.
Yes, Paris Accord.
Now, it's
so
like
did you support it or did you not support it?
Well, no, because I looked at what the requirements were, what the effects were going to be, and it is so outrageously stupid that anybody who read that, you see, and everybody was saying, well, Obama wanted this, and so we should just do it anyways. And it's a good thing because Obama wanted it. Or that it's a bad thing because Trump didn't want it. And I looked at what was really going to be happening, and from an objective observer, as an objective scientist, I was looking at it as the American side had to sacrifice hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars in technology, in cutting back on our energy consumption, on our use of fuels, and China and India, who combined produced 2 or 3 times. They didn't have to do anything for 20 years or 30 years. And in addition to that, we would be contributing hundreds of billions of dollars in cash to the thing. And then, okay, even if it was signed, we did that, we sacrificed all the hundreds of billions of dollars, we didn't have any of our technologies advancing, and we let the Russians and Chinese do their thing for 20, 30 years, what would have been the effect? The effect would have been, at the best, if the absolute best case scenario happened, it would have been the change of 1/10 of 1% of 1 degree of a reduction. Okay, and so that's just ridiculous. That's just totally ridiculous, especially since the Chinese and the Indians are way out producing pollutants and using very bad things. And then of course I was out in China and I know exactly what that was all about. Years ago, from the mid-'80s, I was writing papers and articles about the Chinese and what they were doing.
So one of my friends had said something on here. Hi, Kenneth. How are you? There has been a drastic cutback in the geoengineering programs here. Oh, wait. Okay. Here in Shreveport. Can you say that?
Shreveport.
Shreveport. I can't even say that word. Since we pulled out of the Paris Climate Treaty. I don't know whether it's a coincidence or not. I would love to know. So now, see, I believe in chemtrails. My friend here does not. So he thinks, but there is geoengineering. There's congressional hearings on geoengineering. What is geoengineering then? If it's not those chemtrails in the sky, what is it?
I am not an expert on that aspect, and I wouldn't even hazard a guess.
Okay, so
I don't know if there is a connection or anything. There could be, but I'm just not an expert on that at all.
Okay.
But I do have a word to say about you and your chemtrails.
I'm like always talking about the chemtrails. Look at the chemtrails in the sky. Like we'll be walking.
That'll be the topic.
And I'm always talking to him. Look at him. You know, so.
And that's ridiculous. Anybody who.
He thinks I'm ridiculous, okay? But I'm going to prove him wrong one of these days. So I'm going to prove you wrong because I think there's something to it. Okay, global warming is a tool, nothing more. So Brian, I think Brian and you are on the same, total same way of thinking. You don't believe in chemtrails either, do you, Brian? I don't think he believes in chemtrails, but I do. Anyway, I have to almost
right. And this guy is saying that science has never settled.
Yeah, it's never settled.
Because that's what I'm saying.
Or except for a law, right?
Evolving.
Except for when they call it a law, like the law of gravity or the law of.
Well, right, and that there are few aspects of science that are like that, like the law of gravity, the law of physics, The energy cannot be created or destroyed or to change of shape. So those are different aspects to the science that we're talking about now, dealing with a living, thing like the Earth that has so many variables contributing to its climate. So it's almost impossible for there to be anything that is absolute when it comes to the climate.
So I'm curious about your colleagues at Cambridge University. What do they think about this climate change hysteria? Do they agree with it? Like, are they in agreement? Are they not in agreement? Is it split?
Well, that's it's the funniest story, actually, that there are some of my colleagues that firmly believe that with all their heart and all their soul, they firmly believe that global climate change, global warming caused by humans is going on, and that we are all doomed. Okay, there is just a portion of the colleagues that are doing like that. There are another portion who tend to be more skeptical, tend to want to scrutinize more, and then don't believe that there is that kind of a complete connection. That there could be a contributing factor, that our contribution could be a part of that, but that it could be negligible. And so it's all a matter of reconciling. And what I have found is that it's all a matter of the reason why there's so much conflict is that everybody is coming at this topic from a different point of view. There are some people who are climatologists looking at the atmosphere, and they come up with one conclusion based on their findings. There's oceanographers that are doing studies on the oceans and the temperature changes and the changes of the life, and that's like another set of findings and another set of conclusions. There's naturalists who are looking at the tropical forest destruction and the animals and the production of methane from cows, and they're coming up with another a set of conclusions based on their studies. So it's all a matter of like the different studies and the different kinds of evidence and the different kinds of conclusions, but it's all a matter of the different perspectives that they're all coming at it. And so it's just a matter of everybody who is saying that this is it and this is absolute and is just ridiculous. And that hasn't really done.
It just seems very unscientific. And especially threatening those to put them in jail if they don't believe. I mean, you better get in line or you go to jail. There tells me that person is not a true scientist, because that's not how science is.
Well, right, and this is all another aspect of this whole thing that's going on, is that I am happy to look at evidence. I'm happy to anybody who's out there that comes up with evidence, that comes up with observations, that comes up with conclusions, that can account for another person's observations and conclusions and discount that based on rational, logical reasoning. That's what science is all about. But if that's already done, if that's already been put aside, then what's left is emotion. And name calling and just being this kind of like this hysteria that's going on. Give me evidence, give me observations, and let's come down to a conclusion. And I'm always happy. Being a scientist, I have to keep an open mind. And so I'm happy to see the evidence, and if I'm wrong, if I am incorrect in my conclusions, I'm happy to change my conclusion. But it's the people that say you're going to go to jail, or you don't know what you're doing, or you lost your mind, or whatever. If I don't agree with them, it is just ridiculous. And that's not science. Okay?
Yeah, and that's what bothers me right there. It's like that anybody that demonizes somebody else, it's like anytime somebody demonizes someone else, it's like a way of putting a muzzle on that person and not being able to look into things. So when someone says, don't look at this, guess what my first inkling is to look at it. Because I'm like, well, they don't want me to see it, so there must be something good there, So whenever like the news media say, don't look at Fox, like Fox, they demonize Fox, then it makes me want to watch Fox, because I'm like, what is it that they're trying to hide? And they were trying to demonize the guy that I was talking about. Was it John Coleman?
Well, right.
You know?
But it's another thing is that you have to look. You have to look at the evidence, and I'm always happy to look at evidence. You show me evidence, and if you can convince me, then that's fine, okay? Something like Al Gore, okay? It's like, let me just bring up like an example of Al Gore and his huffing and puffing and showing all of these people's studies and saying that the people were saying, by 2000, by 2010, half of Florida is going to be underwater. Is there no question about it? Half of Florida is going to be under. Okay, so it's like somebody's crazy like that. When you see what happens, is that Florida isn't half underwater, so their results, their findings, their evidence, their conclusions are all suspect.
And
so that's why you have to
too.
keep
What about
doing
the ice
the
caps?
evidence.
Yeah.
Well, and when I was interviewing these scientists from the University of Maryland, from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, part of NASA, is like they're all saying that 5,000 years ago it was warmer than it is today. And so where's from the global warming aspect? What's that all about? And then at the end of the last ice age, it was warmer. And then now they found out that there's more ice on Greenland, and there's more ice on the North Pole than there was like 30 years ago or 40 years ago.
Isn't there more polar bears now too? Isn't the polar bears on a rise now?
That I don't know.
I think I read something about that.
So when somebody says, it's a possibility, it's important to study this, it's important to find alternatives, then I'm all up for that. So let's do that. But until that day comes when there's an alternative to coal-fired places, to coal power plants, don't forget, is that everybody who has a Tesla car, everybody who has an electric car or something that you have to plug into into a power outlet, that's all coming from a coal powered power plant. So it's like you're not helping the environment in that way.
And we haven't found any other kind of energy to use that. So that was going to be my next question. You just
but that's
the coal
another source of energy is like you say. Okay, we need to cut out all the coal to cut away to cut out all the pollutants. Well, so China is producing double, has twice as many coal power plants. India has like 2 or 3 times more coal power plants. So you have to shut those down first. If we shut down all of ours, then it's like they're still putting out their energy and they're polluting. And on top of that, there's no answer, there's no solution to cutting down the power plants here because solar power panels are not yet available. They are not putting out the type of energy. If you ask any of these people that have solar paneled power houses, half of them are saying that it's like they're showering in cold water and there's not enough energy at all. And I don't know if any of you, because I'm a naturalist and I'm a biologist, is I know for a fact that there are more birds that get killed in the windmills. There are more birds that get killed than by all the hunters combined in the world. And so that's
funny. Trump was saying that. I just saw a video of Trump going, "Well, there's all these windmills, but they're killing all these birds." And I literally just saw a video of him saying that.
It's like out of the frying pan into the fire. So until there is, and there are several resources that can be made that are pure, is fuel cells. And liquid hydrogen is the purest form of energy. And whenever we're going to perfect the separation of water molecules into hydrogen and then oxygen, and then using those 2 elements as energy sources, that's going to be the pure answer. That's the holy grail of energy production, but we're not there yet. So we have to keep our coal plants open. And when Hillary says we're just going to like shut down all the plants and kick out everybody, it's like you don't have a solution. So it doesn't.
Well, it's kind of like what's happening where people want to shut down ICE. You know, they want to shut down ICE. Well, then what's going to happen to all these people that are breaking our laws? Like, or they not?
Well, that's another topic for another story. But that's talking about getting rid of
something, but not having a solution for something else. So I just find that interesting as well.
Okay.
Anyway, I guess we should open our Q&A for you guys and ask Elliott any question you have. I mean, he's answered a lot of mine. I had all these, I had like 10 questions, but throughout the conversation, he answered them. So I don't think I have any extra questions here, except for, let's see. I had one from a friend yesterday. Can climate change scientists predict the weather in 50 years?
The simple answer is no. But because it is so complex and having so many variables that it's impossible. I mean, the weather people can use their computers and generate models and tell what the weather's going to be like in a month or a week or a day. But so as the time progresses, there's more variables that are increased. So as there's more variables, it becomes less and less possible to tell what the weather's going to be like 6 months or a year from then.
Oh, okay.
So talking about something that's 50 years has so many other variables that are affecting that if the computer generated intelligence, artificial intelligence, computers are going to be developed to account for all those variables as they are now, that can tell like what the temperature is going to be like tomorrow and the next day and next week.
But even that, they sometimes are wrong.
Right. So what I'm saying is that's the limitations.
Exactly.
Because there are so many variables.
Exactly.
So the further you go out, the more variables you have. And so it just becomes impossible to say. And so especially, with the ever-changing climate, and I want you people to know that the Earth goes in waves of ice ages, of global warmings, of ice ages, global warming. So it's a cycle of events that happens to the Earth, not just global warming, and then everybody dies. Okay, and then it becomes like boiling temperature. Then the temperature then declines as the rain increases, as the cloud cover increases, and then the temperature goes down.
Well, what I liked our conversation we had before about you saying, well, if the temperature rises, then places like Canada are going to be flourishing more and they'll have more of a season. So, like the hysteria, oh my gosh, if it goes up 1%, then that actually could be a good thing. Like it for others, it might be a little hotter for us in California.
Well, you see, and that's
hang out on the beach more.
That's one of the things I want to tell your viewers is that it's all a matter of the perspective of the point of view of the people. Mm-hmm. So, people in Canada, people in Russia and Siberia, people in Mongolia, they're cheering on the global warming. Okay, so it's like, okay, so but if there isn't a global warming, then then when there's a global cooling, then places like Ecuador and Africa would be cheering on. And then of course it's like back what that I was telling you back when the polluters were spitting out oxygen that killed off 99% of the Earth's population, life forms. So is that good or is that bad? So it's all a matter of the perspective. And so, like you said, is if the temperature changed, in Los Angeles, then it's like might be uncomfortable.
Yeah, exactly. It might be a little more uncomfortable, or we would just be out on the beach all the time.
Well,
like,
but
go lay out on the beach.
one of the things that is always there is the effect on other species, on wheat, the production of food crops, of other animals. See, and I've always been brought up that I think of the Earth as like a spaceship. Okay, it's traveling through space. So the Earth is a spaceship. And in any spaceship we make, obviously, there's millions of parts, little rivets that hold the spaceship together. And so as animals go extinct, as life forms go extinct, then that's like taking out a little rivet out of the spaceship. So if you have this big, huge spaceship and you have one or two rivets that come out, maybe it's not a big deal. But if you have hundreds or millions of them that are getting killed, that are being taken out of the spaceship, then maybe that would have an effect. So it's also something that we should be looking at, what effect this current wave of where we're at now in the Earth's history, what kind of effect that's having on the planet's life forms. Mm-hmm. So
very good. Well, okay. We're open to questions right now. So if any of you want to ask questions, I'm going to have him here for another 5 minutes. So ask away, or he can look at this later and see if you guys had questions those of you that are not with us right now and that are watching afterwards. So you can ask him now, or you can ask him later. But I'm going to have him here for 5 more minutes, and maybe you can tell us another story. Maybe you can tell us a story about like one of these videos that you made and the people you met on them.
Well, you see, one of the things I liked the most about this Atlantis program that I did, it was actually funny. It was a funny story that Plato, that had the original story in his a treatise of writings, he had the story of Atlantis, a city, a society that sunk down into the ocean. Okay? And what happens is that if you looked at something that had your point of reference, that anything around it and the movement of anything around it is based on that point of reference. And so it then makes sense that the city of Atlantis, that was essentially an entire civilization. It wasn't like just one city like New York City that dropped down, but it was an entire civilization at the end of the Ice Age and the start of the Renaissance of our current civilizations, that if you saw the sea level rising 1 inch a year, or 1 inch every 5 years, after like 100 years, it would be up like 200 feet. You would not see the sea level rising. You would see the buildings and the structures all being inundated, but you would see them sinking.
Yes,
because your frame of reference is the sea level. You don't see the sea level going up or down. You see the sea level, and that's your baseline, and you're seeing these cities that are being inundated. And so that was just a very funny thing that
Plato said.
Well, that it turns out that Plato's story does have merit, that it does make sense now, that it wasn't cities that like fell into the ocean, but that the ocean levels rose at the end of the Ice Age, and the melting of the caps, the polar ice caps, that all that melted and then became water, and so the sea level rose 200 or 300 feet, but the rising of the sea levels is imperceptible to the human consciousness. We don't comprehend the sea levels rising every year, 1 inch or 2 inches or whatever, we would see the cities falling into the ocean.
Interesting.
So that was an interesting story.
Okay, well,
Okay.
I see that we have no questions. I think you answered probably all of the questions because you're very thorough. So I love that you're so thorough about everything.
So I'm happy to be here, Sheila.
Yes, I
One
am.
of the last of the good guys in my book.
Oh, so sweet. Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you guys for joining us for an Ask Elliott segment. And please let me know what you guys want to talk to, what kind of subject you would like to ask Elliott, because I'm doing like a spin-off of the Bill Nye because I think he's a total whack job. And I think people should have a real scientist and be able to question a real scientist, not one that says that everybody that doesn't believe in him should go to jail.
Oh, and also, anybody that wants to see any of my science TV shows, log on to www.globalscience.biz. That's globalscience.biz, and there you'll see all my shows. Okay.
And I'll be watching 3 of them today.
Okay.
All right. Bye, guys.